It's the Brad and John Show.
It's August 13th, which is a Wednesday, 2025. This is the B block, the Bravo block, which means we started right around 7:20, and we're a little bit late this morning. It's all due to John. John, you ready?
It's time for Brad's Top 3.
It's time for Brad's Top 3.
It is, and we have to sing it twice. Otherwise, it's not nice.
It's time for Brad's Top.
How about that, John?
It's number 3.
I love that, Brad. I love any kind of rhyme.
This is a national one. George Will was on with Bill Maher the other day. Did I get a name right? Is it Maher or Maher?
Yeah, just say, you don't have to over-enunciate the H. You could just say Maher.
Maher, okay. You know who George Will is, obviously, correct?
Yeah. George Will is still alive?
Yes, he's very much.
Okay, he's a national treasure and a baseball expert. I'm glad he's still with us, Brad. What did he have to say?
And a political commentator, and used to work for I believe, the Washington Post. Wasn't he a writer for the Washington Post?
I believe so, yeah.
He was interviewed by Bill, and Bill asked him about the Zoran Madani thing in New York City. And he said, do you think that Zoran Madani is going to be elected mayor? And he said, yes. And he says it's going to be a great thing. Now, what's interesting about this is George Will, once upon a time, actually left the Republican Party, and he gave the analogy that once upon a time Ronald Reagan was a Democrat, and when he was asked the famous quote, when he was asked why he left the Democratic Party, Reagan's response was, "I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me." And George Will said the same thing. But what got the crowd's attention was he thinks this will be a good thing, and I can't remember his exact words, but I'll paraphrase it. He says, every 20 years, some socialist comes along and tells you how great socialism is, and you need someone like Mondami to come along and show you just how screwed up it is, and then we won't have to worry about it for another 20 years, which I thought was sort of an interesting quote. So in other words...
Yeah, that's a great point. So in other words, too, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Brad, but it's kind of like how when Republicans had Cory Bush here for 4 years, if you have someone who's almost a caricature or a straw woman or a straw man, we will be able to point to the New York City mayor every time something bad happens in New York City and say, this is what happens when you elect a socialist.
Well, and the other thing that came out, I don't know if you saw this in the news or not, he lives in a rent-stabilized apartment. Do you know about this?
Yeah, boy, isn't that great? And he refuses to give it up.
Right, he refuses to give it up. And for those of you in the St. Louis area who don't know what this is all about, this is a law that went into effect in New York City years ago where when the rents kept going up, essentially the landlords are forced to keep the rent at a certain level, which... if you're in business, you know that this is a recipe for disaster because every year your utilities go up, every year the cost of doing business goes up, maintenance goes up, supplies goes up, stuff like that. But you got to keep your price the same. And he's apparently very well off, and he lives in a rent-stabilized apartment. And that was the blow given to him by Como, is the Como essentially saying, which I agree 100% with, hey, you live in a rent-stabilized apartment. You're a rich guy. Give that up to somebody who needs it, not you, which I thought was a great line because so far Como hasn't been able to do much of although, the crazy thing about that is when you look at this, you got, to me, the only candidate that's got any cred as far as I'm concerned is Curtis Sliwa. And I will say in full openness, I know him personally, not real well, but he used to do a talk show on what is now Crap years ago, the Curtis Sliwa show, and I ran it, and he gave me a cell phone number, and him and I would talk back and forth from time to time. Interesting guy. But he doesn't have a snowball's chance in New York because he's a Republican, and the other two guys are the current mayor, who has a terrible reputation now, and Como, who got thrown out of the governorship because of the fact that he couldn't keep his hands to himself. So, and plus, I always thought he was like, he sort of reminds me of one of those, I'm a tough New York kind of guy. You know what I'm saying? He had that sort of...
Yeah, I get what you're saying. A little too much bravado.
Right. Okay, move on. You ready for number 2?
Yeah, Brad.
It's time for Brad's number 2.
It is, and John will not like this because it refers to Facebook.
Ooh, yeah. And as I just hear a phone notification go off, I thought maybe you were talking about the fact you leave your phone on during the air, Brad. But maybe that notification was a boomer Facebook post.
Hold it. Let me look at what the notification is. I don't see what it is. Let me look at it. It says, Can we pass a law that when New York fails, the rest of us in the United States do not have to bail them out? Yes, that's Mr. Info Dude. Okay. There yesterday was a post on Facebook from Channel 5 News dealing with the St. Charles Data Center, the proposed St. Charles Data Center off of 370 on Truman Road, I believe. There's an elm. I can't remember. It's down there in the valley. And OMG, if you want to read the NIMBYs, read that. There must have been 150 comments about there like, we don't want no stinking data center. I mean, the interesting thing was, and the one guy comments, it's like 99-1. The one guy comments, which I thought was really interesting. He essentially commented, now you know why big tech doesn't come to this area, because of the fact.
Yeah, of course.
In other areas, big tech is welcomed. Now, the crazy thing about this is, it revolved around the fact that they're going to suck up all the water. We won't have any more water, and there won't be more power left. But the interesting part to me about this is that in another part of St. Charles County, we have another big monster data center that's been there for years and was recently in the news to a certain extent because they just put in are in the process. I don't think it's done yet. They're putting in a great big monstrous solar field. Do you know what I'm talking about, John?
Is this either Energizer or Enterprise? Who is it?
MasterCard.
MasterCard. That's who I always forget. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. It's right there off the highway. You could see it.
Right. MasterCard has a huge data center. Matter of fact, I actually know a couple of people that work there, and it's been in the news recently. They put this big solar field in, which is going to power. And the crazy thing about it is, if you know where MasterCard is, it's right there in the Winghaven area, and I don't hear any of the Winghaven people complaining about Have you ever heard anybody here complaining about, the MasterCard data center, it's terrible, they're sucking up all the water? I mean, have you ever heard anybody complain at all about MasterCard?
No, that's because they're out playing pickleball.
Yeah, they're out playing
I think if you live in Winghaven, you're either assigned a pickleball paddle or you're one of these millennial chicks that puts on a weighted vest and walks around town.
Or if you have a pineapple on your front lawn or a pineapple hanging up.
Oh, wow.
Whatever it is. Okay, so, John, there were one after another, people complaining about this. I'm thinking to myself, holy cow. This is the ultimate NIMBY thing because of the fact that there are certain areas that would love to have this data center. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And we talked about this. This was in my top 3
I know.
Last week, Brad. But
right.
There's Citizens Against Virtually Everything.
Right.
A phrase I got from you. And then the NIMBY folks. But of course some folks are going to be mad about it, Brad.
And the crazy part of this is, if you look at the map, and they had a map on the Channel 5 website, it's not really near anybody's house. That area down there is, and the other thing was, it's in the floodplain, blah, 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 blah. Okay, whatever. Matter of fact, can I diverge just for a minute?
Yeah, it'd be the first time ever in the history of the show.
I went to the Cottleville, Weldon Springs.
I just saw it on Facebook, Brad. What a great job you did taking pictures, getting in people's face and like catching them at an awkward moment. What a great job.
John, I love that you make fun of me. I love taking candid pictures of people. Okay, and that's with my 400 millimeter zoom lens, so I was nowhere close to them, John. Okay, I was like literally halfway across the room.
I'm giving you a hard time.
Okay,
so what happened there, Brad? What happened at the meeting?
I sat right next to the city administrator for Cottleville. And it was sort of interesting because his name is Michael Padella, Padella, and he's an MBA. He's the city administrator. And I asked him about how they got the stuff. If you've driven along 364, anybody who's driven along 364 in the past 3 years can tell you this story. I'm probably been going on for like 6 or 7. They filled in a whole big area that was literally, floodplain. It was Darden Creek, which would overflow there, and they filled in this huge monster area. And I never told you this. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, I drove through there just because of the fact I'm going to drive through there. I can't believe how many houses in there. And he told me that when it's done, there will be 5,500 new homes and townhomes in that area. And it's all down in the floodplain. Now, he reminded me of this, and I said, how did you guys get that done? And he said, you have to understand, there's 2 categories. There's the floodplain and the floodway. Do you know the difference between the two, John?
Absolutely not.
Okay, I unfortunately know the difference because of the crap transmitter site, because this is what I've dealt with for past 27 years since I've owned the radio station. The crap transmitter site is in the floodway. And the floodway is different from the floodplain. And it's it's once of these things. It's like FEMA stuff, and it's like DNR stuff, and
different definitions,
yes,
and bureaucratic nonsense.
Right, exactly what it is. Anyway, it was interesting sitting next to him. But
why didn't they? And they got most of their dirt from Coldwater Creek, right?
No, they didn't. They didn't get their dirt for Coldwater Creek. But nice try, John. Nice try. But anyway, if you get a chance, go to Facebook, look at the Channel 5 Facebook post from yesterday about the data center thing, and read some of it. And John, I couldn't resist. I put a couple snarky comments in there.
Oh, I bet you did, Brad.
And the one lady...
That would be worth the price of admission to Facebook, seeing Brad's comments there.
The one lady says, we should move it to another area. And I just put in one word. You know what the one word was?
NIMBY.
Ladue.
Oh, wow. I heard that I have a friend of a friend who's 80% sure that Jasmine Crockett grew up in Ladue, even though 30 seconds of research shows that she grew up in North St. Louis County.
Now, are you sure of that?
Well, I don't know, Brad. Go to according to AI.com, which was your May shiny object, and you can see the answer.
Okay, you ready for number one?
Give it to us, Brad.
Okay, number one.
And now, big finish, Brad's number.
I find this very interesting because of the fact that, John, you and I are both North County boys. I still know people who live in North County. Matter of fact, when we had Bob Frischman? Was that his name, Bob Frischman?
Bob Frischman, yeah.
He still lives in North County. You made fun of him. I still have friends that live in North County. I still have friends that have current relatives in North County and, unfortunately, deceased relatives who lived in North County. And I was told by one of them that they recently, I don't know if you know this, over the weekend, they opened up the website for the RECA people the RECA applications.
Yeah, I did see that, Brad.
Yes. And guess how many pages the RECA application is?
Oh, I'm sure it's only like 2 or 3 pages.
24 pages long. And get this, you can't fill it out online. You can download it. Yeah, so you have to download it, and you have to fill it out with your little pen. And what's interesting about it is they have tons of things you have to give them: birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, divorce certificates, and every single thing has to be certified. Certified copies. You can't just say, well, I got a copy of my mom and dad's birth certificate. Nope. Won't do. You have to go have it reissued, because chances are the copies of the birth certificates you have are not certified.
Yeah, they're just regular old birth certificates. So this is a good deal for governments, right? More people can come in and stand in line in an inefficient place for an hour and pay money to get a certified copy.
Right, exactly. And what you have to do is to file the application. Once you get it done, you either have to scan it all in and file it as a multi-page PDF, or you have to physically send it in. I guess you stick it in a big envelope. There's maybe some place you can drop it off, stuff like that. But the interesting thing was, the qualifications are you lived in North County for at least 2 years after 1949. So anybody who lived in North County for more than 2 years, and that would be you, John. I mean,
boy, I got a list of maladies, mental and physical, that I'd love to get some money for.
Me too. I lived in North County from 19.
Now, Brad, so serious question. What are you supposed to get? Like, if you say, oh man, I have adult onset diabetes, and I'm pretty sure it came from that time I went to Danny's house and played in Coldwater Creek. What do you have to show?
Well, it's interesting because two of the people I know who are working on this, they both have deceased relatives. One is a father of theirs, and the other person I know has a sister that died of cancer, and that's what they're looking for. And you have to have certified copies of the death certificate, and the death certificate has to, say which kind of cancer and stuff like that. It gets very, very complicated, and to the point where you have to have all this supporting documentation. You have to show that you were actually living at that address. It can't be the kind of thing that, like, you had a rental home in North County, that you had and somebody else lived there. You've got to show, essentially, it's trail of evidence, essentially. Is
and it also keeps the fraudsters out.
Well, yes, and that's the sad part, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was said to me by one of the two people that I know that say, well, it's sort of like it keeps the people who are just out to scam the system away, because they're not going to, well, I don't know, maybe they will, I mean, it's like me dealing with copper thieves, I mean, there's one of my broadcast engineers figured out he had his transmitter site hit by the copper thieves, and he figured out that they stole about $80 worth of copper, and it took them four hours to do it. So, and there were two guys, so essentially they were making $10 an hour, and he said,
but when you need meth, you're going to steal copper.
He said they could have gone to McDonald's and made $20 an hour. But anyway, that's the RECA application, 24 pages long. So, once again, government bureaucracy, but. And the crazy thing about it is this goes along with the thing with the senior citizens with the property tax thing. Why can't you do it online? Everything else you can do online nowadays. Nope, you can't do it because
it's to create a little bit more of a hurdle. And if there's one thing that people that were around like in the 40s and 50s are good at, it's Adobe Acrobat.
Well, the one interesting thing about this is we can thank one of our former legislators for this. Well, actually, he's now a legislator again because he's the county guy. It's the Dave Schatz law. The Dave Schatz law is we're going to give people back their money, but we're going to make it so incredibly difficult that they'll just give up. That's what we're going to do. That's the Dave Schatz law. Did you know that,
You're
John?
Such a naysayer. Rand, can I give the correction of something you were right about yesterday?
Yes, go ahead.
Yesterday, in C Block, you asked me if David Barklage had been on Jason Rosenbaum's Friday edition of Politically Speaking.
And you told me I was
said,
wrong.
Brad, there's no way. Long story short, Brad, a listener who I shall not name corrected me and said Brad was correct. David Barklage was on Rosenbaum's show. Brad, the story that Rosenbaum posted to St. Louis Public Radio was only on redistricting and didn't mention David Barklage at all. But the full episode of Politically Speaking included a segment about initiative petition changes, or as mouth-breathing dunderheads, who we might know, say, IP reform. Jason had a segment about IP changes, and David Barklage was the featured guest. Brad, you heard it correctly, and I was wrong.
Well, which brings me to that. If that was the case, you and I need to go back into that in C Block because I have some questions about what he said. To me, it didn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, but in short, and I think we can do it in 30 seconds here. David's point is that, and I read the transcript of it yesterday, Brad. David's point is that there are some changes that we could make to initiative petitions. For example, as it relates to the ballot summary, you have to make it less than 100 words. David pointed out how ridiculous it is to add 40 pages to the Missouri Constitution, like the marijuana thing. But David's point was that the initiative petition process is set up as a check on the legislature. Now, I don't think David mentioned this, but Governor John Ashcroft in the 1980s was opposed to changing the initiative petition process. He said it was a necessary check on the Democratic legislature. And Barklage's point is that the initiative petition process, you could stand to tweak it a little bit, but to make it incredibly harder to put something on the ballot takes the natural checks and balances away. So I think that in 30 seconds, Brad, without you and I having to belabor it for another segment, I think that's David's point, is that it's a necessary check on the legislature and the governor.
Well, that was the interesting thing, because I thought to myself, isn't this guy like super duper Republican? Isn't he one of the, the guys that, we need to change this, got to change it. But he was against it.
But I mean, I think people would, it's not to say that people that want initiative petition changes are not reasonable, but David is also a reasonable guy. And I'll just point out before we go to break, Brad, I am old enough to say that I remember when David Barklage was a leader of HRCC, many of us, including me, looked up to David Barklage then, look up to David Barklage now. David remembers what it was like to toil under Democratic majorities, what life was like. And at that time, initiative petitions were pretty much the only thing Republicans had. And David's point is, don't get rid of that checks and balance on the legislature.
Interesting. Okay. C Block's up next.